I'm Madison Mary and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my June wrap up for you guys. So this is coming a little bit late just because, you know, life is busy. But in the month of June I read 12 books. It was my second best reading month of the year so far, which is really nice. Not going too strong in July yet, but hoping I can pick it back up soon. So in the month of June I read 8 physical books, listened to 2 audiobooks, and read 2 ebooks. Out of these, the genres were 2 fantasy, 2 romance, 3 contemporaries, 3 thrillers, and 2 non-fictions. Out of these, we had 7 YA and 5 adult. And then for my favorite statistic, my total page count for the month of June was 4,015 pages. As per normal, I'm going to be starting with my lowest rated read up to my highest rated read. However, this month I do have 2 books that were non-fiction that I did not rate. I normally don't rate my non-fictions. All the times I read non-fictions because they're school books. This time I read them to educate myself on the Black Lives Matter movement and just, you know, racism here in the United States and, you know, just in general. So the first non-fiction that I didn't rate was Me and White Supremacy. This is by ḻᴏᴏᴅᴅ and it is kind of a self-help book cross a just like informative non-fiction because it is split up so that you read it over the span of I think it's 20 something days, and each day that you read it, it has like its own little prompt at the end of the section that you read for that day, and it kind of forces you to really think about your own role in white supremacy. I thought it was really interesting. This was the first non-fiction that I did read for, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, and so I kind of found it to be a lot more eye-opening than I think it would have been if I'd already read other books before this. It seems like a very good basis in my opinion. Not that I have anything against like books that are self-help, like that you have to like write things down. I just don't love them. It's definitely a book that you have to take your time with because it's written in a way that you take your time with it. And then I also read Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi. This is basically a man's letter to his son about what it was like growing up Black in America. And I really liked this one because it is kind of a autobiography in a sense. This is more of a journey that, you know, you're kind of following Ta-Nehisi throughout his life and kind of the different racial like microaggressions and just blatant racism he experienced. I really enjoyed it and I definitely understand why it is so acclaimed. It had a lot more of a personal level to it than a self-help book does, but that's just because they're completely different, you know, like things. Okay, now moving on to the fictional books that I read this month. I'm going to start with my 3-star reads. I had nothing that was rated lower than that. So my 3.5-star read of the month was If We Were Us by K.L. Walters. The more that I think about it, I actually think this is actually a 3-star read. So I was really excited for this. It was a very hyped up book for me to read this year. It just didn't really live up to the expectations. This is also a debut, so that's kind of, I think, maybe a little bit of a reason why. So we follow Sage and Charlie and they've been best friends since they were little. They have always been like attached at the hip. They absolutely love each other to death, but it is extremely platonic between the two of them. However, no one else really believes this. Charlie is kind of a womanizer at their boarding school and never really sticks around with the girl for more than like 2 weeks to a month. And everyone says it's like the Sage factor, you know, that they're always supposed to end up together, so he can't end up with anyone. When the senior school year starts, there is a new kid in school, which is very, you know, unheard of for their grade in a boarding school. And this new guy ends up forming a very close friendship with Sage, but also at the same time a friendship with Charlie. And the friendship that Luke and Charlie kind of start building up becomes a little bit more than a friendship and romance starts to kind of bloom. It definitely focuses on Charlie's journey of realizing his sexuality, and then Sage's part of the story focuses on her romance with Charlie's twin brother Nick. And Sage's journey is about her commitment issues because her parents got a very messy divorce when she was younger, so she kind of vowed to never really make the same mistakes. When following Charlie and Sage's POVs and alternating chapters, you definitely saw that there was a stronger connection that the author had to Sage, and so Charlie sometimes felt a little lackluster, to be quite honest with you guys. I did enjoy his storyline. I think it was very important. I absolutely with all my heart think that Luke is my most favorite character in this book. He is openly gay in the beginning when he moves to the school, and so Charlie's biggest issue is he doesn't want to also be labeled like Luke is as like one of the gay kids. As much as I did love Sage's storyline, hers was kind of boring, so that's the reason why it's, you know, 3 out of 5 stars. Now the real 3.5 star read is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. This is a romance between Georgie and Travis. Georgie has always been treated as the little kid because she's the youngest in her family, and it doesn't help that, you know, she actually works as a party clown. She aspires to have her own entertainment business, and she does her own children's parties, and the fact that she does dress as a clown and hangs out with kids kind of causes not only parents to not take her seriously, but her entire town. Then we also have Travis, and Travis left the town years ago. He is Georgie's brother's best friend, and he was this massive baseball star, but then he tore his rotator cuff and ended up having to quit the big leagues and come back home, and he feels like a complete and utter failure. When he finally gets the opportunity to kind of land a new job in the baseball world, his manager tells him that he needs to kind of clean up his act to become more wholesome. And so when Georgie hears this, she comes up with a plan. She proposes that the two of them fake date for a little while so that Travis can get a more wholesome reputation and Georgie will finally be taken seriously by her family. The only issue is with this is the fact that Georgie has actually been secretly in love with Travis since she was a little girl. My thing with this book was I was basically reading it for the sex scenes only. They were really good, super steamy. I would definitely pick up more Tessa Bailey just because of that, but I didn't really care much about the relationship between Georgie and Travis. A big part of this story is the fact that a lot of people end up saying at the end, you know, oh, Georgie, you're way too good for Travis. Like, Travis is not good enough for you. And like, I kind of agree. Like, yeah, it's cute, they're fine together, but like, I don't want them to get married. Like, they're a cute couple, like let them be together for a couple of years, but I just thought that she had so much more potential and she was so much more fun to follow as a character because a lot of her storyline was about being a very ambitious woman and kind of proving herself to everyone and to be like very stubborn and awesome, and I loved that about her. But then she was like such a sucker for Travis, and I feel like he kind of brought her down instead. I also didn't really understand Travis's kind of love for Georgie. It felt very insta-lovey, or like he had like insta-lust for her, and then that insta-lust turned into love. And that does happen in life. I just kind of feel like we didn't really see the development enough in this, but you know, the sex was hot, so that's kind of the reason why I wanted to read it in the first place, so thumbs up for that. Moving on to my 4-star reads. The first one is Blood Heir by Amelie Wenzel. I was supposed to read this in May, but ended up having to read it in June because I sucked reading in May. So this Blood Heir by Amelie Wenzel was initially pushed back for publication because of controversy to do with slave trade in this book. And I do want to quickly address that yes, slave trade is in this book. All the characters in this are East Asian, and we follow how there are a group of people that are called affinites, and they have affinities, and this is basically magic, and people who have magic are basically enslaved and sold off, and so there's human trafficking in that sense. And there is a scene in this book where a character is killed during the human trafficking aspect in order to kind of bring the main character to kind of act in a more violent way. So I do want to quickly address that does happen. So this book is following Anna, and this is a very, very loose Anastasia retelling. And so we follow Anna, and she is a blood affinite, and she has to keep her blood affinity secret. She has kind of actually been imprisoned in her own castle ever since she was a child. And when her father ends up dying, Anna ends up getting blamed for it, and they end up putting her on trial to die. So instead, Anna ends up faking her death and escaping, and then decides to track down the man who really did kill her dad. However, the only lead that she has is Ramson Quicktongue, and he is this young criminal mastermind, so she ends up enlisting his help. I did really enjoy this. As time has gone on, it's not as memorable, so maybe it's a 3.75, but I really enjoyed the world building. I thought that the magic was really cool. I loved Anna's blood magic. One thing that I thought was really awesome about it was the fact that it took a toll on her. So there are certain, you know, fantasy worlds where people can use their magic, and it seems as though their magic kind of has no end, and that's not the case in this. You know, people, if they use their magic too much, they kind of burn out and they just faint. And then there are cases where there are these there's like kind of like, you know, wolfbane to wolves, it's the same kind of thing where there's like this special like drug, like potion, that if you get infected with it, it basically nullifies all your powers. And there are like also like a certain metal that does the same thing. And so it shows you that they're not all powerful, because sometimes that is the case in fantasy world. So I kind of like that that wasn't the case here. I also love the world building because it is kind of Russian inspired. It is very snowy and kind of like atmospheric, and that's always a favorite of mine. And I also thought that the romance in this is extremely slow burn, and I was so grateful because I didn't want it to be a romance that was just like kind of at the forefront of this, because our two characters are so headstrong and they both don't trust one another and they have their own desires and their own goals, that it kind of would have cheapened everything if their romance took the forefront. So I was kind of glad that it kind of fell to the wayside and that the story kind of focused more on the growth of our characters. And I'm really excited for the sequel of this. I think it's going to be really awesome and that it's going to be even better. The next 4 to 5 star is You Will Be Mine by Natasha Preston. I listened to this on audiobook. I adore Natasha Preston. She has a new one coming out soon. She writes some of the best YA thrillers. They are a little trashy, but in some of the best ways possible. So You Will Be Mine, I should have looked up the synopsis. I forget the characters' names. So we follow this group of university students and they all stay in the same like house with each other. There's like 6 of them. And on the week leading up to Valentine's Day, one of their housemates ends up getting a letter saying, "Your heart will be mine." And the guy brushes it off. The girl thinks it's a little creepy, and then he ends up getting murdered and his heart is, you know, ripped out of his chest. So that's one thing. And then after that, more letters start appearing and all the housemates start kind of dying off one by one. And so it's about them trying to figure out what's going on. And I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. The reason why it's 4 out of 5 stars is because I didn't love who the person was that was killing them. I thought it could have been revealed in a better way. It was definitely interesting and I was like, are you serious? Like, this is effed up. Like this person is messed up. But the issue is that there wasn't enough inklings beforehand to show it. Maybe if I reread it, I could see it, but you know. And the next 4-star read is Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. I really had so much fun with this. Part of me thinks it's maybe a 4.5, but I don't know, we'll see. So we follow Stella Lane and she has Asperger's. She is very high functioning on the autism spectrum and she works as an econometrician and she loves her job, but she doesn't really do well with love. And her mum kind of is looking for Stella to start a family. And so when Stella ends up being told by a co-worker that, you know, Stella maybe just needs more experience, she thinks, well, what's the best way I can get experience? And she goes, I'm gonna hire an escort. So she hires an escort to kind of help her get used to having sex and being intimate with men, because she's never really enjoyed it and has never been comfortable with it, and she feels like it's just never gone well. And the escort she ends up hiring is Michael, and Michael makes a rule that he only spends 1 night with a client and that's it, but he ends up making an exception for Stella once he meets her. It's about how the two of them actually end up falling in love while they have this kind of like bargain going on. I had a lot of fun with this. I do think that the reason why it's 4 and not 5 out of 5 stars is because Michael did annoy me a little bit. He was just so self-loathing and woe is me, I'm throwing myself my own pity party. And I hate when the conflict is the fact that the guy just feels like he's so not worthy enough. And it's fine for like a part of the book, but when it lasts the entire book where the guy is just consistently like shitting on himself, it's really not that fun. Stella, on the other hand, is an obvious 5 out of 5 stars. She's one of my new favorite characters I've ever read about. I absolutely loved her story. I loved how I learned all the things about what it's like to be on the high functioning autism spectrum, and the way that she has all these kind of sensitivities, you know, to like loud noises, and also the fact that, you know, when she wears clothes, she doesn't like there to be any tags, and the way that the seams are, and she has all these routines. And it was just very interesting, and also it was such a beautiful story about her kind of realizing that just because she has Asperger's doesn't mean that she's not able to love. And if someone thinks that's the reason, then that's their problem, not hers. Like, there's nothing wrong with her just because she has this diagnosis. And I thought it was actually a very beautiful story, and especially when you read the author's note at the end, you know, where Helen Huang didn't find out until she was like in her late 30s that she also had Asperger's, and how that's kind of what led her to write this book. It made everything so much more special, and I'm so excited to read the rest of the books in the series. And then my last 4-star read is I'll Never Tell by Catherine Mackenzie. This, by the way, has like, do you see this? Oh my god. This is a suspense, I'm not gonna call it a thriller, it is a suspense novel. And I don't know, I really loved it. It's been a while since I've physically read a thriller because I do tend to listen to them more so in audiobooks. But we follow the five McAllister siblings, and it's 4 younger sisters and an older brother. So 20 years ago at the McAllister family camp, Amanda Holmes was brutally killed. And now it's 20 years later and Mr. and Mrs. McAllister have died in a train accident. And in their will, they have stated that unless they can prove that the older brother did not kill Amanda Holmes, then he will not be included in the will, and that it is up to the 4 younger sisters to decide. And so what we do is we follow present day chapters from each of the 5 McAllister siblings as they're kind of dealing with the 48 hours that they have to figure out whether or not they trust that their older brother didn't do it, and also kind of reliving what happened that day because all the McAllister siblings had a different part and role in what happened to Amanda, and they didn't all tell the truth 20 years ago, and so it's about everything kind of finally coming to light. And then we also get a couple of chapters from that day 20 years ago of Amanda leading up to her death, and it was really cool because here, let me find one of the instances that shows. At the end of each of Amanda's chapters, there are these little things that says where everyone was present during the different times, so it's the timeline. And as the book goes on, you kind of see the timeline changing and like whether or not the recounts that people were saying were true and how Amanda was experiencing it, and it was actually really fun, and I would definitely say that I do recommend it, especially as a lake thriller. So yeah. Next we have my 4.5-star reads, and I have 2 of them. The first one is Sisters of Sword and Song by Rebecca Ross. Rebecca Ross is one of my auto-buy authors. I absolutely love her. All of her books have actually been 4.5 stars for me, which is kind of funny. There's always a little something missing for them to be a full 5 stars, but they are just so phenomenal. So this book is Greek mythology based, and there are these gods in the world, and they used to actually interact with the humans until a couple of centuries ago, in which they stopped. And when they left artifacts on the ground to allow some humans to actually have magic, because magic is only passed through humans if they have the bloodline of a god in them. But of course, once the gods left, you know, there weren't any more babies being born directly from the gods, so it was like a whole bloodline thing. And so we follow Everdeen and Halcyon, and they are descendants of one of the fallen gods, the only fallen god, because he ended up giving up his godly power because he fell in love with a mortal. And so they actually were cursed to never have magic in their blood, and so they never really had an opportunity to ascend to one of the magic courts. You know, they're stuck in the common courts. But Halcyon actually ended up inheriting like really amazing strength, because that was like one of the only things that you're allowed to inherit otherwise. And so she was sent off to be part of the Bronze Legion, which is basically the Queen's Royal Guard. And so this was a very prestigious thing. So when the book starts off, it's been 8 years since the Royal Guard training, and we follow Everdeen, and she's, you know, preparing for when her sister arrives. Like, everyone's really excited, you know, she's coming back, she's like really affluent, they feel like it's so special. Everdeen's a little bit jealous. However, on the night before Halcyon's supposed to arrive, she ends up actually breaking into Everdeen's bedroom, and she ends up revealing that she has committed a grave crime and that she's actually on the run from the Bronze Legion and that she's being hunted down. And then the next day you find out that Halcyon is about to be tried for murder. Halcyon is sentenced to 15 years of servitude, and they're split up into 5-year segments. So when this happens, Everdeen refuses the idea that she's going to lose her sister again for another 15 years, and she believes that what her sister has been accused of isn't true, and she thinks that there's a lot more at play here, so she ends up volunteering to take some of Halcyon's sentencing. So Halcyon ends up having to spend 10 years in servitude working in this, it's called the Quarry. It's basically like a place where you have to do like manual labor, like a prison camp kind of a thing. And then Everdeen will serve out the other 5 years as a servant to the man whose son that Halcyon murdered. And so we end up following both the sisters during this time. I was kind of surprised that we actually followed both of the sisters, because I thought we were just going to follow Everdeen, but I actually ended up really loving both of their POVs because they both have such completely different stories as to what they are experiencing. Everdeen is definitely coming more into herself. She has a permanent limp because of an attack that she had when she was a child, and so she has always been seen as lesser because of that, and people don't really believe that she's capable of anything. She's never really believed much in herself. In this reignited flame that she has for looking for her sister's absolution, she ends up becoming a lot more confident in herself, and her journey is just so beautiful in a sense of, you know, self-discovery and kind of regaining your own confidence and belief in yourself. Plus, she is the sister who ends up having a romance. And what I love about Rebecca Ross is that her romances are always a subplot, and they're always such a beautiful slow burn, and I always love them. They're some of my favorite romances that I read just because they are such a natural part of a fantasy plotline without getting in the way of the actual development of our characters. This book is definitely more about family and about the journey of these two sisters and reconnecting after these years apart. And it's one of my favorite sisterly bond books. The next 4.5-star read is Kissing Lessons by Sophie Jordan. I really like this a lot. So we follow Hayden Vargas, and she's very notorious in her school for being a slut, okay? The thing is her reputation is kind of unwarranted, but also kind of warranted. And so we also follow Emmeline and Nolan Martin. Now, Nolan Martin is also a senior like Hayden is, and he is kind of the golden boy of the school. He's definitely gonna be prom king, and his girlfriend is totally gonna be prom queen. They've been dating for 2 years, like, they're super cute. And then there's Emmeline, who is one of Nolan's two younger sisters. She is very controlled by him in the sense that their father passed away and Nolan kind of has taken on a more fatherly role. And so one night at a party, Emmeline ends up getting an idea in her head where she decides that she's going to ask Hayden Vargas to give her lessons on to be more confident and seductive and sexy, because Emmeline knows that so long as her brother kind of is a force in her life, if she doesn't kind of learn to take charge, she's never gonna get a boyfriend. She has a secret crush on Beau, who is actually Nolan's best friend, brother's best friend, bro. When Nolan starts saying that his younger sister's hanging out with Hayden Vargas, he is pissed because he doesn't want Hayden's reputation to leak into kind of his sister's innocence. The issue is that in his valiant attempts to prevent Hayden and Emmeline from hanging out, he ends up inadvertently spending time with Hayden, and he kind of begins to see that there is a lot more to her than the rumors suggested, and that she's actually a really cool person. Interestingly enough, we actually follow all 4 point of views. So we follow Hayden, Nolan, Emmeline, and Beau. Now, the reason why this is 4.5 is because A, Beau's POV made no sense apart from the fact that you understood that he was hot for Emmeline, and him kind of being like, oh, Emmeline's actually really attractive, but like, she's my best friend's little sister, like, I can't see her like that, like, what am I doing? So like, his POV was kind of like, I was always bored. I was like, really? And then the other issue is Nolan is a bit of a dick in the beginning. You know, he does kind of judge Hayden, and he is a bit of a hypocrite because he says, oh, like, I want to protect her, but then he also is like kind of judgmental towards her. So he has character growth in this, and it does take a long time for his character to grow. And I do think that that could have been achieved in a bit of a better way. This book is hella steamy. Like, it is very, very sexy. Like, when it comes to a YA contemporary, like, this is definitely, you know, teetering on, you know, the potential to be a new adult. So do know that. And then there is the fact that there is a lot of talk of, you know, girl hate and slut shaming, and a lot of those topics are very prominent in this. There's also talks about sexual assault because Hayden's mom brings home these men and they're not always great. I really loved Hayden's storyline. I wrote a Goodreads review for this, and it is my favorite Goodreads review that I've written all year. So please check it out, because I go in depth about how much the slut shaming in this and the way that Hayden kind of embraces it in a sense, and the way that she kind of tries to act like, you know, it really doesn't bother me, and she ends up, you know, playing with it in order to kind of make more people upset, and the way that she also closes herself off from any actual real relationships. I related to her in a lot of different levels, and I think that's the reason why I loved this book so much, was because it meant a lot to me. And I do think there's going to be some people who read this and be like, oh my god, the girl hate in this is just like awful, like, why do all books have to have that? The thing is it's realistic. This shit happens in high school. People slut shame so much in high school. I remember my high school experience. There were certain people, when they had sex, next thing you know, all over school, people made so many rumors up. It exists, and just because it exists, just because we don't like it, doesn't mean it shouldn't be in books, because it is real. And I think that this is actually a really accurate portrayal of it. And Okay. I'm not gonna get heated. This is not gonna be a really long video. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. It's okay. I love it. That's all that matters. So now we're gonna move on to my 5-star reads, one of which is actually one of my top books of 2020 so far. I definitely think it's gonna make it to the end of the year, but give me a sec. So the first 5-star read is The Lost by Natasha Preston. This is hands down my favorite Natasha Preston I have read yet. This is my 5th Natasha Preston. I listened to them all on audiobook, as I mentioned earlier, but this one is just, oh my god, she just keeps getting better and better. Oh, okay. Like I said, they're a bit trashy, so do be aware of that. So we've all these 2 girls who live in this kind of remote western town, and a lot of people kind of run away from it, and you know, people just want to get out, people, you know, become like drug addicts and leave. There's all different things. So, you know, teenage runaways aren't uncommon. The thing is that these 2 teens one summer, they're kind of like just chilling, and they're like, you know, it's kind of strange. Like, you know, people have gone missing before, but it seems like it's kind of been exponential over the last couple months. And so they start kind of looking into it. And as they're looking into it, they end up meeting these 2 college guys and kind of start like flirting with them. And then the 2 college guys, you know, at one point very quickly are like, oh, we'll give you a ride home, like get in the car. One of them's like, ah, no, we're good, thanks. But the other one's like, oh my god, yes. Oh my god, get in the car, like it's cool, like be cool. And so they get in, and then they get kidnapped. If you want to go into this blind, which is what I did, don't listen to any more from this. I'm gonna put a little spoiler here. This is basically just the synopsis of the book, but I think it's so much more fun to go into these not knowing. So they end up getting kidnapped, and as it turns out, these guys are actually, well, there's 3 of them. They run this little compound where they trap random teenagers in like a room, and then this room then leads to a hallway which has 6 doors to 6 different rooms. And every day they choose someone to go into a room, and they're torture rooms. So they basically get off on having these teens and torturing them in different aspects to see how much the body can take, and they love inflicting torture. And so each of these 6 rooms has a different method, but there's door 0, and door 0 is basically a fight to the death between 2 of the teenagers. So if you don't ever listen or you do something wrong, you're threatened with going to door 0, which means unless you kill someone, you yourself will be dead. It's like really messed up. Each of the rooms is really messed up. Like, this would be such an awesome movie, and all of Natasha Preston's books end with an open ending. It's just how she writes, and all of her books have been like that. And in the beginning I was kind of annoyed, but as I've read more of them, I like them. But this has been the best open ending yet. And lastly, one of my newest favorite books of all time is Date Me, Bryson Keller by Kevin Van Wy. Oh my god, I love this book. I loved it. Oh my god. I was smiling to the brim for like 80% of this novel, and then the last 20% we had a couple tears, which is always a given, but yeah. So we follow Kai Sheridan, and he is in the closet. He's gay, but he hasn't told anyone because he doesn't really want to be known as the gay kid, and also the fact that, you know, in his town, I think they're in Texas, and so they're a little bit, he doesn't think his parents are going to take it well either. And at the beginning of 2nd semester of senior year, there is a dare put into place for the most popular guy in school, Bryson Keller. Bryson basically says, oh, I could date any girl if I wanted, I just don't ever want to really date anyone. I don't believe in dating in high school. And they were like, oh, you think you could date a different girl every week? Then do it. Prove it to us. And so there is a dare that any girl who asks out Bryson Keller on a Monday morning, the first girl to ask him out, he has to date for that week. And if someone doesn't ask him out on the Monday, he has to take the bus to school for the rest of senior year. So we follow a certain Monday where a couple things go down, and Kai ends up asking Bryson out. And there were never any rules to stipulate that it had to be a girl that asked Bryson out, so he ends up saying yes. The thing is that Kai doesn't want people to know, so they end up secretly dating for that week. And it is just such a cute romance. Like, I was giggling so much. I thought it was just adorable. It was so sweet. The 2 of them together, I just like instantly shipped. It was beautiful. Everyone was amazing. The end of this deals with a lot of homophobia, and there is violence towards gay people at the end of this, so do be aware of that if that is at all triggering to you. But it was just such a beautiful book and I loved it, and if I had the monetary means I would buy this for everyone. I don't, so I can't, but I love this. This was Kevin Van Noy's debut and he is now an auto-buy author for me. So that is it for my June wrap up. If you guys did enjoy it, please hit the like button down below. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel, and until next time, thanks a bunch guys. Bye!